We are here to discuss another very interesting topic, which is why quantum security matters. Right? Quantum computing isn't science fiction anymore. It's a timing problem. Today's digital trust, banking systems, government communications, cloud services, and digital identity, all of them rely on cryptography designed for classical computers. Quantum computers change that assumption. They won't break everything overnight. However, they fundamentally threaten the mathematical foundations we depend on today. This isn't about panic or hype. It's about readiness. The question is no longer if quantum impacts security, but when, and whether we'll be prepared when it does. And to have this conversation, I have with me the founder and secretary of ISC2 Queensland chapter, Benjamin Luck. He's no stranger to all of us. He's been on my show before. Ben, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Sujit, and thank you for letting me talk today. I much appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right. So, rolling into the conversation, Ben, this has been a conversation, a topic where every conference this year have had speakers talking about it. So I thought we've had speakers prior to you talking about it on this topic. But I think as time passes, this topic becomes very, very relevant, and it's an important topic to be in the agenda. So for the benefit of the viewers and my followers of this channel, I would like you to briefly tell us why quantum security matters.
Yeah, so looking at quantum security in today's frame, it's starting to become more important as an issue just due to the fact that there's a lot more investment going on, there's a lot more interest, particularly from governments. There's been a lot of acquisitions in the quantum space, even just very recently, within the past few months. A lot of investment by government, and unfortunately, and it doesn't really help terribly much, a lot of it seems to be very on the quiet and not very discussed. A lot of this technology that they're talking about is not so much, I guess I wouldn't say public domain, but it's becoming commercially competent. So there's that kind of component where stay and look at quantum. It is starting to become a big ticket item for a lot of people to look at, particularly governments, because they're the ones that have the purse strings to do this and the reasons to do it as well. Now, when it comes to a quantum computer, now, just setting the framing, you'll hear a lot of things about qubits versus classical computing. And when we talk about quantum computing, there's more than just one sort of quantum computer. There's several competing sorts of quantum computers. So you have superconducting, trapped ions, photonic. So all these different types of quantum computers trying to essentially work towards the same thing. And you'll hear a lot of people say qubits. So often when you hear about people talk about qubits and supercomputers, they're talking about what they call noisy qubits. So noisy qubits are kind of like the raw hardware of that. Then you have logical qubits, which essentially is kind of redundancy of noisy qubits. So you might have 12, 20, 30 physical qubits to one logical qubit. Now, this will become important a little bit later on as I discuss the security implications of this. So keep that in mind. And with these qubits too, noise, error correction, that's a huge issue. And as quantum computers get better, that noise and error will be reduced, which means that you'll be able to get more logical qubits per grouping of physical qubits. So if a computer has 1,000 noisy qubits, it may only have 400 or 300 logical qubits, but that may increase as time goes on. So this is the thing where, as computers are developing quantum computers, not only are the qubits getting larger, but the logical qubits are getting, it's becoming more efficient. So those useful logical qubits are the bits that we're mainly looking at. So coming to that, this, I guess this is where, okay, well, what does that mean in cybersecurity? Qubits, logical qubits, noisy qubits, they're all qubits, aren't they? So they're really good for solving particular mathematical problems. Quantum computers are not general computers. You can't just run Windows on them. They're used for particular mathematical and algorithm calculations. So they've got particular uses and some data science components too, but we're not really delving into that, but mainly on the cybersecurity side, which means probably, as you know, Sujit, encryptions, they're mathematical in nature, asymmetric, symmetric encryptions. So can you list some types of encryptions that you probably use in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, I think everybody uses the RSA, which everybody is familiar. I mean, for session management or to, protect the VPN tunnels. So these are probably everyday use for every common man and a corporate. But Ben, I have a follow-up question for you. Is this a real threat?
So yes, there is. It's one of those things where it's always difficult to calculate what the threat is until you actually have something in your hands. And this is how I used to think of it back in a couple of years ago. I go, oh well, it's 10 years away, 20 years away, this kind of thing. It's all theoretical. So I was a bit of a non-believer in some ways, or always pushing it way out to a point where I thought, well, it's not going to happen before I retire. But things are changing very quickly. So you mentioned RSA. RSA is one of the particular encryption types that are at risk. So is AES, or also elliptical curve. These are mathematical encryption systems that are at risk from quantum computers. Now, when we look at quantum computers, there's extra components to that. So if you're breaking RSA, for example, you need to use something like Shor's algorithm. Or if you're looking to crack symmetrical encryption like AES, use Grover's algorithm. So there's a couple of different algorithms that quantum computers can use to crack those sort of encryptions mathematically. Now, the problem is that I guess we've got two issues. We've got those particular encryption types, they're crackable. Also, two, any information that we've had previously stored or has been stolen or has been archived or put somewhere, all use those same encryptions, or worse, sometimes worse. So you may find that some of these symmetrical encryptions may be using still even there's encryption on disk. So I guess keeping that in mind, we've got all this information out there already encrypted. Also, we're still using cryptography stuff that has, risk to quantum computing. Now, looking at the quantum computing, with these algorithms. So, at the moment, there's about, depending on which system you look at and how noisy a system is, as I was talking about noise and qubits before. Noisy qubits, probably in a system nowadays, between 1 to 6,000 qubits, which you're talking about 400 to, maybe 1,000-ish logical qubits. Keeping that in mind as well, looking at the algorithms. So we're getting improvements in these algorithms in Shor's algorithm and in Grover's algorithm. Shor's algorithm, through optimizations done by Gidney, for example, allows us to start looking at cracking RSA at 1,400 logical qubits. Now, 800 is not far off 1,400, is it? 800. So that's where we are today. Food for thought. Same for AES. So AES, definitely need more. But with improvements on Grover's algorithm, you're only looking at several thousand logical qubits. And here's a good example. This going back to, I guess, asymmetrical encryption again. SEC for Bitcoin, you can start attacking that at about 2,500 qubits, logical qubits. So these numbers are getting a bit too comfortably close. So
and at a rapid pace, right? I mean, it's much quicker than we probably anticipated.
Correct. So I guess this takes us to where governments are at, where security frameworks are at, what recommendations are at. So I guess you've heard about the NIST recommendations, or?
You can. I mean, I'm aware of it, but I would like to, spell it out for our audience.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
I mean, maybe you could also talk from the context. What's the timeline we are looking at? I mean, we've evolved through several stages in the IT domain. I think people became very conscious about the Y2K migration, and subsequently, different transformations have happened at different timelines. And this is an important topic. And what are we looking at?
So if we take our current government views, we're talking about what they call Q-Day, which is an awesome term, which they're thinking probably 2035 was, I guess, the ballpark they kind of threw out there. It was a ballpark, and that was a couple of years ago. And NIST, as well as Australian Cybersecurity Directorates, they're looking at wanting everyone to have quantum resistant encryption systems by 2030 in place. And probably this year is the year we should have been planning to get rid of the older encryptions. So when we start looking at saying, like you say, we're looking at RSA, still using RSA, it's like, well, why? So we're already behind. To add further to that, the increase of quantum computing's qubits, as well as qubits that are not so noisy to produce good logical qubits, we may hit that threshold in 2027. The way things are going, if you want to draw a line, that's not only from improving quantum computers, because that's one part, there's also the improving of the algorithms to do the information. And then inside that, we've got an enabler, which is AI, which is allowing us to work with better algorithms or come up with better algorithms as well. So it's kind of between the algorithms and the hardware is where things meet. So probably looking at Q-Day could be anywhere as early as 2027. And we're talking about government saying, well, you need to have by 2030. That could be 3 years too short.
So Ben, I'm just going to interrupt you and ask you something. I mean, you keep repeatedly talking about the government. Right? Would the government be concerned about their own systems where most of the citizen data is held? Or are you referring to dictates coming from the government targeting the critical information infrastructure organizations like the banks, the insurance companies, utility service providers? What's your view on this?
It has to be a holistic view. I do feel that maybe what's happening at the moment is that the governments, particularly the frameworks, and I guess those consultations about this have not been updated recently enough. So the government definitely wants anyone that's got critical infrastructure, whether it's commercial or governments, for the country to operate, to be in a post-quantum world in cryptography. But it feels like that maybe that information needs to be updated. I sometimes do feel that, and as you're talking about, you've heard it quite recently on your cast and at conferences and so forth. I'm often feeling, and nothing to do with your podcast, but I'm often feeling we're regurgitating the same sort of information that we had a year or 2 years ago.
You're right. Absolutely.
So, and through that we get this sort of false sense of security.
Correct. And also, people keep mixing up with AI and quantum, right? But while these are two distinct areas, but it could complement each other. Maybe you could just give a view on that as well.
Yeah. So quantum computing as itself has no real relation to AI. Really, where AI comes into quantum computing is that it is an enabler to help design possibly better algorithms or do better data science with the information. So not something that comes out of a quantum computer doesn't necessarily come out and you go, okay, we're done. It still has to be then put into a more generalized sort of computing system to then have something come out of that. So a quantum computer is only a part of a greater system that you would be implementing. So to cut into that, I guess it's very defined, very separated, but they're complementary.
Okay. 2 more questions for you, right? I'm going to ask them together. Who do you see as the greatest threat actor? And what's your advice to the corporates?
Greatest threat actor will be governments, because they're the only ones that can actually use this. And it will be information that are collected by governments. Probably the biggest risk is the information that's already been collected by foreign governments through hacking or espionage, collected. They should have been collecting for years, haven't been able to access the data, and at some point they will be able to do that. For sure, it still may take weeks, months to crack that information, but they will then have some sort of tool that can do that.
Right. So what you're saying is harvest now and decrypt later.
Correct.
And monetize it even later.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Not necessarily in terms of dollars and cents, but in some form of benefit for the proprietor. Right. Any closing thoughts, Ben, you would like to leave with the audience?
Well, I not to be alarmist, but I just had that essentially the alarmist discussion. But there's a good side to this too, which we'll discuss later on in a particular another cast. But these are the dangers now where we are at quantum computing. It's coming quick. We do have quantum computing getting quite good, algorithms getting quite good. We do have current encryption, which is at risk. Some of it's is harder to crack than others, but it's going to erode all encryption. And these quantum systems and algorithms, even past Q-Day, are going to get better and better. It's not like they stop at Q-Day and then stop getting better. So we still have a continuing problem where we're going to have to deal with this at some point yet.
So the conversation has to continue, and so we will, right? So we will continue this discussion with another episode where we would be talking about what happens post-quantum cryptography. So Ben, thank you so much for taking time to set the context, talk about the quantum computing era, what it means, and what is it to the corporates and the individuals. Thank you so much, and see you in another episode. And viewers, those of you who have been listening to our podcast, we'd like you to continue to support us by liking this video, sharing with your friends and colleagues, and follow us for more. Thank you.